This is First Contact, Stories of the Call Center.
You're in a remote world. You said you got to pull to a lot of talent, right? But how are you actually attracting and retaining this talent? How are you actually finding them? I know you mentioned millennials. I know you mentioned a large pool of people, but how are you going out and competing against everybody else who now goes, hey, remote or hybrid works. I have access to the same talent pool. What are you doing that's different or helping you maintain that staff that's remote?
Yeah, so I think I'm debating on whether I want to give away the secret sauce or not. It's not really secret sauce, but so I was fortunate enough. One of the last things I did when I was working at a brick and mortar center was we had locations all over the country, and the recruiting was a challenge, major challenge. It was failing at the time, and I had never been involved with recruiting other than as an operational guy yelling at the recruiting team because they weren't delivering, right? And so the owner of the company came to me and said, hey, listen, we've got a major problem over here. The guy we just hired to run this department walked out after 2 weeks because it's such a mess. And would you be willing to do it? I said, I'm a team player. Let's go. I don't know. I told him, I was like, I don't know anything about this. Nothing. Zero. So understand, you're putting a guy in that I understand operations and I understand how to do some stuff with some things, but I don't know. I don't know anything about it. So I went in and was able to run that department for the last year and a half I was there. And we built something that was very successful. What I learned was that recruiting is a lot like I'll use it kind of the stock market, right? There's times where it's up, there's times where it's down from a people in the recruiting space and job space. There's times where there's a lot of jobs and not a lot of people, right? And there's times where there's a lot of people and not a lot of jobs and everything in between. So you can't treat the market space the same all the time. You have to understand what space you're in to be able to recruit effectively. The other piece that we discovered was almost all the ATSs, applicant tracking systems out there, were not conducive for the type of recruiting that a call center needs to do. I looked at a ton of them, and all the traditional ones that are big boys out there, we looked at them and said, this is great, but it's really designed as an HR function to bring people on board, but not in mass quantity, not fast, and not with the methodologies that we need to use in our recruiting processes that we'd like as a call center. So when we opened LEC, I'd already learned all that, luckily. It wasn't new to me. It was, okay. So, and I say all of that because this goes back to the best practices piece and the techniques piece. We knew that, and I'll use this example, we knew that recruiting was no longer an HR function. Recruiting was a sales function. And we had to treat it like an outbound sales campaign. Now, you can't use the word sales when you're talking about recruiting, but just in the mental aspect of framing it up, we needed to look at it, and luckily we said, hey, we do outbound sales. I've done outbound sales. I've been an outbound salesman my entire life. So is my brother, and so is John, and all these other guys. So we were very familiar with it. How do we take the fundamentals of that and implement that into a recruiting process, right? That's not reactive, that's proactive, and run in such a way that it is able to execute at high levels when turned and ramped up. So that was the first piece for us. We had to put all those things in place and to create that mentality of hey, it's not turn a spigot on, have somebody come to a website, fill out an application. The other piece within that was how much friction, to your point, how much friction is there? When you're in a market space, and I'll give you my opinion here, it's based on experience, but it's an opinion. Once they created the, quote, monster of quick applications, where people can just do the slot machine application process, it dynamically changed how people are going to have to field applications and recruit. It's like a sales process where you have people doing click leads. So I've got to be able to source those, get through those quickly, and contact the ones that match up, and I have to put those processes in place that do that. I've got to train the team in place to understand what we're looking for. Again, that's why we started doing the ideal agent personas, of saying, how do we understand who we're looking for so that we can identify them in a sea of applicants. How do we do that? Because marketing's easy. You just turn the thing on and put money on. You're going to get applications. That's the gist of it. They're not always going to be the applications that are correct for what you need to do. So we had to build all those processes, do the training, put the right recruiters in place, because as we identified, they're not HR people. Nothing against HR people, but HR people are built a certain way. The type of recruiter we needed to fit more of a salesperson persona. So we had to go and put those type of people in place that are hyper self-managed, very aggressive, and they're going to go out and get things, and we reward them in that capacity, much like you would as someone who's working off of an outbound campaign. So for us, those are big things. In the market space, we understand branding is going to be important, so we've slowly continued to try to build a very positive brand online, working on reviews, treating people right, so hopefully we don't get bad reviews. It's not 100% guarantee, because, again, we all know that if somebody's pissed, they're going to go write a bad review. If they're happy, they're probably not going to go write a review because they're happy. So there's some things that we had learned over the years to do there to help promote the brand and make sure that that voice of the happy employee was being promoted as well, right? And then some of those typical marketing things to put those things out there that are attractive, and then keying in on messaging that is true to who we are, but also registers with the people that we're trying to attract. And we embrace the millennial generation. Like I've said all along, like I think this will probably piss a lot of people off there, but I think this is one of the greatest generations that's ever come across. They're very misunderstood, but every generation is. I laugh every time I hear somebody go like, they're entitled, they're lazy. Well, I mean, my grandparents said that about my dad, who was a baby boomer, and my dad, who was a baby boomer, said that about me, who's a Gen X. Every generation says that about the next generation because they don't understand them. So the appearance of it is there's something wrong, but there's not. You just got to understand who they are. And if you start viewing them as your customer versus your workforce, you'll start trying to figure out ways to connect with them. And that's how we view any candidate and any employee. First is they're our customer. How do we make sure that our customer satisfaction is very high, right? Because those are going to be the ones out driving customer satisfaction for our clients.